بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. We find ourselves very near the month of Ramadan. So what's expected is we discuss some of the fada'il and virtues of the month of Ramadan. However, I'm not going to do that due to another reason, which I will tell you later on. I'm going to talk about a different topic, but it is correlated, inshallah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran in Surah An-Nisa, verse 19, وَعَاشِرُوهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ Live with your spouses in goodness. So the purpose of today's talk, inshallah, is going to be that Ramadan is coming, of course. And Ramadan is, as Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says in a hadith, Shahru Sabr, the month of patience. It is the month where you and I need to show Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala our patience. And the fact that we do not have access to food and drink, and we still have to go about our daily lives, still have to fulfill our duties, that puts us at risk for more difficulties in terms of our emotions, our mental health. It's hard to control yourself when you also do not have food and drink and still have to go to work and still have to communicate with people. And that is why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that it's a test. It's the month where you have to display sabr, patience. There's nothing else you can do. And in reality, when a person is fasting, a part of the fast is also that you do not erupt. You do not get angry. So part of fasting is to not get angry. It's not just not eating and drinking. We're not allowed to argue. We're not allowed to curse. We're not allowed to say certain things. That is integral to the fast itself. And the place wherein a person may argue the most is the individual that you have to communicate with the most, and that is your spouse. More so than your co-workers and colleagues and people that you see in the masjid and other family members, because we do have barriers with these individuals. We have a level of professionalism. When we go to work, we're not going to say something to our boss that is inappropriate out of fear, and because there's a certain decorum there. When we come to the masjid, if something happens, usually we have power over ourselves. We're going to control ourselves because we need to present ourselves in the best manner. However, for some reason, when we're alone with our spouses, there are no barriers. There is nothing, there is no formalities, due to which we usually reveal our true selves. And in that situation, we may break the spirituality of the fast, which is to control ourselves, to be such an individual that swallows their anger, as is mentioned in the Quran, وَالْكَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظِ. Those people who swallow, literally ingest their anger. So they have anger, they get angry, however they do not display it. So this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sums up our relationship with our spouses. He says, وَعَاشِرُوهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ Live with them in goodness. And in many ahadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam tells us that if you want to critique yourself, if you want to understand what is your level of character, if you want to know if you are a person that exemplifies the prophetic character, ask your spouse. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says in a hadith narrated by Imam al-Tirmidhi, أَكْمَلُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ إِيمَانًا أَحْسَنُهُمْ خُلُقًا وَخِيَارُكُمْ خِيَارُكُمْ لِنِسَائِهِمْ. The most complete believer is the one who has the most character. The most complete believer is the one that has the best character, and the best of you are the best of you to their wives. So if you really want to know, do I have good character? If you're getting a doubt, you feel like, maybe I have great character, then you should ask someone to interview your spouse and see what their answer is. Their honest answer. Not an answer wherein they are coerced or they feel forced to give this positive answer, but their true, honest answer. If they say that you have good character, then this is a testimony that you are a person of good akhlaq. Rasulullah ﷺ also tells us that we have to be very cautious. Men have to be extremely cautious with their wives, because this is a place where the only thing preventing a woman from receiving poor treatment from her husband is taqwa. Traditionally speaking, the women would have sabr, they would do absolutely nothing if the husband lashes out. And so the only barrier that a man has or a woman has as defense is her husband's taqwa. Men without taqwa do as they wish. As Rasulullah ﷺ said in one hadith, that I have received news from many of you, women came to complain to Rasulullah ﷺ that they were being abused. He said that you people who are doing this to your wives are not the best. You are not doing well. You are doing wrong. In another hadith, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, مَا تَرَكْتُ بَعْدِي فِتْنَةً هِيَ أَضَرُّ عَلَى الرِّجَالِ مِنَ النِّسَاءِ. I have not left behind any kind of fitna more harmful for people, for men, than women. Now this can apply to the fact that women in general, for men, the lust is a very harmful thing for men. But also the responsibilities that you have to your wives is very dangerous if you do not fulfill them. This is a huge amana that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts on our shoulders, a trust. And when we got married, we said that we will fulfill that trust. It's a lifelong endeavor. And in Surah At-Talaq, the verse, the surah of divorce itself, and Ibn Abbas calls this Surah An-Nisa as-Saghir, the lesser Surah An-Nisa, because it talks about the rights of women in there. That surah, it's only 2 pages long in the masahif that we have, that is common. There is more exhortations to taqwa in that one surah on 2 pages than you find in any 2 pages in the Quran. The surah that talks about treating wives correctly and the ahkam and rules of divorce, it has more ittaqullah, fear Allah, have taqwa of Allah, be conscious of Allah. Why? Because that is the determining factor whether this woman is not going to be abused or not. There's no other thing preventing that from her husband. So Rasulullah ﷺ says, this is very dangerous for you. You're treading on a tightrope. Be very cautious how you treat your wives. Rasulullah ﷺ also tells us that a wife is a huge ni'mah. And I will get to the rights of a husband as well. It's not just one-sided. Rasulullah ﷺ spoke to women and men. Rasulullah ﷺ says in one hadith that is in Sahih Muslim, الدنيا متاع وخير متاعها المرأة الصالحة. This dunya is meant for you to take benefit from. Mata' is a thing of benefit. And the best benefit that a human can get, a man can get from this dunya, is a righteous wife. There's nothing better than a righteous wife. So you could have millions of dollars, you could have the best job, you could have everything. Rasulullah ﷺ says the best mata', the best benefit that the dunya can provide to you is a righteous wife. So if you have been given a righteous wife, you should show shukr and thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this shukr and thanks should manifest itself in good treatment to your spouses. Now the question, who is a good wife? What is a good wife? According to the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And mainly it comes down to about 2 or 3 things. There are a list of duties, etc., that Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam speaks of. But in general, one who has a lot of ta'zeem and respect for her husband. This is what is necessary for a woman to give to her husband, is respect. Not so much as cooking and cleaning as we have kind of made it in our culture. That actually, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam doesn't say is absolutely necessary. It is part of something, if it's in our culture, then that should be honored. But what is mentioned in the texts that we have is respect. There's a very interesting story where Rasulullah ﷺ was sitting in the masjid and some of the Sahaba were learning from him. A person from the Ansar came and they had a complaint. They said, "Oh Rasulullah ﷺ, we have a camel, our family, and this camel we used to use it for tilling the ground and we need it for our livelihood. Something happened to this camel and now it's gone mad. It has this issue where it doesn't obey us. It's become wild. We cannot tame it. Can you please come and do something, make a dua?" So Rasulullah ﷺ told the Sahaba, "Come, let's go." And they went to see this camel. When Rasulullah ﷺ found it in its stable, he went inside and the Ansar, the people who were owning this camel, they said that, "Rasulullah ﷺ, please don't get close to this camel, we're afraid." that it's going to harm you. It's absolutely wild. It's like a wild dog. As soon as it saw Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the camel, it stopped being rough, it calmed down, and it went in front of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and it did sajda. The camel did sujood to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam gently grabbed the hair of the camel and led it to the work that it was supposed to do, and then it began to do work. This is a mu'jiza, a miracle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But the point here, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, and this is about respect. The wife must respect the husband. So Sahaba, they said, Ya Rasulullah, هذا بهيمة لا يعقل يسجد لك. This is a beast, O Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It doesn't have intellect, yet it is doing sujood to you. وَنَحْنُ نَعْقِلُ فَنَحْنُ أَحَقُّ أَن نَسْجُدُ لَكَ. We have intellect, so we should all the more do sujood to you. Out of respect. This animal, this camel is doing sajda to you, O Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we should be ashamed. We have intellect. We should do sajda to you. This was the thinking of the Ansar. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "La yasluhu li basharin an yasjud li bashar." It is not correct for a human to do sajda to another human. We do not do this. وَلَوْ صَلُوحَ لِبَشَرٍ أَنْ يَسْجُدَ لِبَشَرٍ لَأَمَرْتُ الْمَرْأَةَ أَنْ تَسْجُدَ لِزَوْجِهَا لِعِظَمِ حَقِّهِ عَلَيْهَا. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, and we have to understand this properly, if it was correct for a human to do sajda to another human, I would have commanded women to do sajda to their husbands because of the great amount of duties that they have to fulfill for her. لو كان من قدمه إلى مفرق رأسه قرحة تنبجس بالقيح والصديد ثم استقبلته فلاحسته ما أدت حقه. And this is exaggeration. Sometimes there's hyperbole in the Sunnah. We find this in Quran and Sunnah. It's a phrase, a way of speaking. He said, the right of the husband over the wife is so great that if the husband had wounds from his foot to the top of his head, and pus was coming out of it, and the wife licked all of the pus from it, that she would not still fulfill the right of the husband. Again, this is hyperbole. He's not expecting anyone to do this, and it's probably impermissible. It's going to be haram because it's najis. This is a figure of speech to show the great amount of haqq that the husband has on the wife. Sometimes we hear the other way around, that have taqwa, treat your wives carefully, as I did mention. However, this is also in the Sunnah. These are not my words. I am sharing with you the words of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in authentic Sunnah, the hadith of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, this hyperbole is to create fear in both men and women that they do not overstep the boundaries. Men cannot even, as we're going to get to it, say anything rude or curse at their wives. It's impermissible, it's haram in the hadith. Similarly, the wife cannot do anything that shows disrespect to the husband. This is the ideal relationship that, oftentimes we fail to uphold. But these are the standards that we find in the Sunnah. In another hadith, that Aisha radiallahu anha, she states that I asked Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, أَيُّ النَّاسِ أَعْظَمُ حَقًّا عَلَى الْمَرْأَةِ. Which person has the most right upon a woman? Now we hear the hadith many times that a person came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and said that which parent of mine, or who has the greatest right upon me? And he said, your mother. And he said, okay, then who? And then he said, your mother. And he said, then who? Then he said, your mother. And then who? Then your father. So after 3 times, and the actual wording of the hadith is, who deserves husnul sahabati, the best of my relationship, my good character, who deserves that? The word wasn't respect. It was, who deserves my kindness the most? And 3 times he said, your mother and then your father. This, however, needs to be understood in its context, because when Aisha radiallahu anha asked, which person has the greatest right upon a woman, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, zawjuha, her husband. So what Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was saying in that hadith is to show kindness with words and actions and softness that you must give to your mother. And that hadith is directed to men. When Aisha clearly, explicitly asked, who has the greatest right upon women, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, zawjuha, her husband. Then Aisha says, فَأَيُّ النَّاسِ أَعْظَمُ حَقًّا عَلَى رَجُلٍ. Who has the greatest right on the man? He said, Ummu, his mother. So that hadith about the 3 times where he says, Ummak, your mother, your mother, your mother, then your father, he's addressing a man. If a woman had come to Rasulullah ﷺ and said, who has the greatest right upon a woman? He would say her husband. We have to understand both of these hadith, as Aisha clearly says here in this hadith. Now in another hadith, Rasulullah ﷺ says, and I'm talking about the virtue of the woman serving her husband. This is part of our religion. Just as it is part of the religion for a man to have taqwa in his relationship with his wife. Salama, one of the wives of Rasulullah ﷺ said, that Rasulullah ﷺ said, أَيُّمَا مَرْأَةٍ مَاتَتْ وَزَوْجُهَا عَنْهَا رَاضٍ دَخَلَتِ الْجَنَّةِ. Any woman, any Muslim woman who dies and her husband is happy with her, has entered Jannah. Any woman who has died and her husband is happy with her, has entered Jannah. Husayn bin Mihsan radiyallahu anhu said that his aunt went to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he said to her, أَذَاتُ زَوْجٍ أَنْتِ? Are you someone who is married? قالت نعم. She said, yes, I'm married. قال فَإِنَ أَنْتِ مِنْهُ? How do you serve your husband? What is your relationship with your husband? She said, مَا آلُوهُ إِلَّا مَا عَجَزْتُ عَنْهُ. I do everything for my husband except for what I can't do. If I can't do it, I'm absolutely weak. I cannot do something, then I don't do it. Other than that, I do everything for my husband. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam then said to her, فَكَيْفَ أَنْتِ لَهُ فَإِنَّهُ جَنَّتُكِ وَنَارُكِ. Depending on how you are to your husband, that man is your Jannah or your Jahannam. Your husband will manifest as your Jannah or Jahannam to you. How you treated your husband will be how you enter Jannah or Jahannam. So these are words that Rasulullah ﷺ shares with us in regard to a woman, her responsibility to her husband. Rasulullah ﷺ in another hadith that is narrated in At-Tabarani, he talks about the men of Jannah and the women of Jannah. So he tells the Sahaba, أَلَا أُخْبِرُكُمْ بِرِجَالِكُمْ فِي الْجَنَّةِ. Should I tell you of the men in Jannah, what their qualities are? قُلْنَا بَلَا يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. Sahaba said, absolutely, please share this information. He said, النَّبِيُّ فِي الْجَنَّةِ. The Nabi, Anbiya are men, they are in Jannah. وَالصِّدِّيقُ فِي الْجَنَّةِ. A Siddiq, like Abu Bakr and others who reach that stage of wilaya and closeness to Allah, they are in Jannah. وَرَجُلٌ يَزُورُ أَخَاهُ فِي نَاحِيَةِ الْمِصْرِ لَا يَزُورُهُ إِلَّا لِلَّهِ فِي الْجَنَّةِ. A man who visits his brother, he has so much care for other Muslims that he goes to the edge of the city to visit him only for the sake of Allah, to see if he's healthy, if he's good. That person's also going to Jannah. Essentially, you have prophets in Jannah that are men. You have Siddiqs, really close to Allah in Jannah. And people who care about other people. Those are the men of Jannah. Then he says, أَلَا أُخْبِرُكُمْ بِنِسَائِكُمْ فِي الْجَنَّةِ. Should I not tell you about the women of Jannah? قُلْنَا بَلَا يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. They said, please. He says, وَدُودٌ وَلُودٌ إِذَا غَضِبَتْ أَوْ أُسِيءَ إِلَيْهَا أَوْ غَضِبَ زَوْجُهَا قَالَتْ هَذِهِ يَدِي فِي يَدِكَ لَا أَكْتَحِلُ بِغَمْضٍ حَتَّى تَرْضِ. Or تَرْضَى. He says the qualifications or some of the characteristics of these women. This is obviously not an extensive list. He says they are the loving women who love their spouses. Waludun, they have given birth to many children. They've gone through a very difficult time being mothers. If she gets angry or someone does something harmful to her, or her husband gets angry at her, she says, I'm placing my hand in your hand. I will not sleep until you are happy with me. It shows the patience of these women who serve their husbands. So this is found in the Sunnah, that a woman should have utmost respect for her husband. And I'm going to get to why I'm speaking about this in the month of Ramadan as it is coming. Now, coming back to the discussion about women and men treating the women correctly. That was just a little tangent that I wanted to share. That Rasulullah ﷺ does talk about men's rights as he did women's rights. Rasulullah ﷺ tells us men that if you see something in your wife that you don't like, don't blow it out of proportion. Sometimes we only see the character trait and the flaw that we are angry with. And we ignore hundreds, if not thousands, of good traits that this woman has. For instance, this man once came, this is a mursal hadith, but a person came to Umar radiallahu anhu when he was the Khalifa, and he knocked on his door, and he knocked 3 times. And the person came to Umar radiallahu anhu because he was having some marital issues. He wanted to get a fatwa, and this is when Umar radiallahu anhu was a Khalifa. So he knocks 3 times and then he leaves. He actually heard the wife of Umar radiallahu anhu raising her voice at Umar radiallahu anhu. There was some altercation happening, so he left. He said that he's in the same situation as I'm in, so probably no one's safe from this, and he left. Later on, Umar radiallahu anhu heard the knock. He couldn't attend to it. He asked people around, who was that knocking on my door? And he found out. So he went to this person, and he said that, why did you knock on my door? Why did you come? He said, it's not a problem. He said, no, you have to tell me. What is the issue? He said, actually, I came because I was going through some marital problems. I wanted to get your advice and a fatwa, but I saw that you were also kind of going through the same thing, so I just left. Umar radiallahu anhu said that, you see, this woman, this wife that I have, she is the means of me having taqwa. She is the coolness of my eyes. She allows me to fulfill my desire. She takes care of my children. She takes care of my house. She does so much for me. So sometimes when she gets upset and she may say something, I have patience. So then this person said, my wife's like that too. So he said, then you should have patience too. So this shows the character of Umar radiallahu anhu. This also shows that no one's exempt from arguments. This is natural. This happens to everyone. So what I was saying is that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells us not to pinpoint and really dissect the character of our spouse and say that you have this character trait, I can't stand it. Rather, the ta'aleem and the teaching of Islam is to focus on the good traits that they have. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says in a hadith that is in Sahih Muslim, لا يفرق مؤمن مؤمنة إن كره منها خلقا رضي منها آخر. A Muslim man should not be upset and hate his wife due to a character trait. If he's upset at one character trait, he will be happy with so many others. We have to start thinking positively regarding our spouses. Yes, they have character issues, they have character flaws, but don't you and I have character flaws? We probably have much more. The same husnul dhan and good thoughts that we have for ourselves, we should offer that to our spouses as well. We have so many negative character traits, but we only think of ourselves as good. But when it comes to them, they may have a few and so many positive traits, but we only think negative of them. So it's actually in this hadith, the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying that you cannot do this. In another hadith, the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam talks about the rights of a woman on her husband. We spoke of what a woman owes her husband, and that is utmost respect. What does a man owe his wife? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, a person came, he said, Ya Rasulullah, ma haqqu zawjati ahadina alayh. What is the right of our wife on us? He says, أن تطعمها إذا طعمت. You should feed her what you eat yourself. وتكسوها إذا اكتسيت. Whatever clothes you wear, whatever quality you have, she should have the same. ولا تضرب الوجه. Do not hit her on her face, he says. Do not hit your spouse. And another thing, there is certain ayahs in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks of this. But when we look at the action of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his wives even tell us that he has never lifted his hand against a woman in his life. And then Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, وَلَا تُقَبِّحْ وَلَا تَهْجُرْ إِلَّا فِي الْبَيْتِ. You cannot even do tuqabbih. Now what does this mean? In the commentary it says, you should not say قَبَّحَكِ اللَّهِ. You should not curse at your wife. Meaning, may Allah curse you. You can't say anything like that to your wife. You can't use harmful language. And subhanAllah, I was reading some fatawa. In the Hanafi madhab, they actually borrow something from the Maliki madhab. I don't know if they're Maliki brothers here. But the Hanafi madhab actually borrows some masail from the Maliki madhab. And apparently in the Maliki madhab, if a husband is very rude to his wife, that is proper, accurate grounds for the woman to seek an annulment of the marriage. If he's very rude to her and he curses at her, he's abusive with his language, she has the right to go to certain scholars of body and annul their marriage. So the Hanafi madhab sometimes takes from them. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "La tuqabbih." Do not curse at your wife. Do not use foul language to your spouse. They have rights. They're not people that you could just do whatever you want with them. وَلَا تَهْجُرْ إِلَّا فِي الْبَيْتِ. If you do get into an argument, do not leave the house. Leave her bedside and you can sleep somewhere else, but you are not allowed to leave the house. So there's a lot of wisdom in this. Sometimes women feel like I've been abandoned and the husband rushes out of the house. You can go to another room, play video games or whatever it is you do, but do not leave the house. Now, Rasulullah ﷺ also talks about when situations get very dire, when situations get hard and difficult. And I want to highlight this point. He says in a hadith that is narrated by Abu Dawood, أَبْغَضُ الْحَلَالِ إِلَى اللَّهِ الطَّلَاقِ. The most hated halal thing to Allah is divorce. So we take this and we understand this, and some of our cultures have taken it to another degree. We say it's the most hated thing to Allah. That's not what the hadith is saying. The hadith doesn't say the most hated thing to Allah is talaq and divorce. The hadith says the most hated halal thing to Allah is divorce. We treat it as if it is haram and worse than shirk. Someone divorced his wife, it's like shirk, subhanallah, what happened? It is halal, it is permissible. However, this should only be employed when all other means have been sought. Counseling, etc., discussion, arbitration, as the Quran highlights for us. And another thing I wanted to highlight is the importance of learning about all of these ahkam. Divorce is something very serious in Islam. And it is something that is compulsory for us to understand the laws, the marital laws of Islam. Rasulullah ﷺ says, طَلَبُ الْعِلْمِ فَرِيضَةٌ عَلَى كُلِّ مُسْلِمٍ. Seeking knowledge is fard on every Muslim. Seeking knowledge of Islam is a compulsion on every sane, baligh, meaning a person who has reached puberty, Muslim. You have to seek knowledge. Now, what kind of knowledge is it compulsory for you and I to seek? Whatever you're involved in, that is compulsory for you to seek. So if you pray salah, you have to pray salah. It is compulsory for you to understand how to pray salah. If you are someone who has enough money to give zakat, it is compulsory for you to understand zakat, inasmuch that you can fulfill your duty. If you are someone who is married or planning on getting married, it is compulsory for you to understand marital law. This is not an option. Now, why do I say that? Because so many people out there don't even realize, and they've already given their wives 3 divorces. They don't realize. And they don't even realize that the limit is 3, and after that you can't get married to them anymore. And they don't also realize, and probably many of us here don't realize, that you don't even have to use a specific word for divorce. And they also don't realize that you don't have to sign a document for a divorce to be valid. All you need to do is say it. So these are rulings that you and I have to understand. It's compulsory for you and I to seek these rulings. So now, what is the whole point? Why am I mentioning all of this about spousal rights right before Ramadan? Because Ramadan is coming, and a true Ramadan is going to be where you and I are kind to our spouses, are kind to our family members, are kind to all of those around us. As Aisha radiallahu anha says in one of the first ahadith in Sahih al-Bukhari, that in Ramadan, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was more generous than an unleashed wind. If you think about a tornado, or you're thinking about a heavy wind that's blowing, it spares nothing in its path. She compared the giving and the generosity of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to this tornado or this unleashed wind. Now, in what sense? In the sense that he's just throwing money everywhere? It's not just monetary benefit. He was kind with his words and his actions as well. So you and I have to be extremely kind to our spouses, and even if they anger us, even if they do something that makes us upset, both women and men, we have to be extremely kind to our spouses, because if we are not kind to them, this is going to spoil our fast, and we expect to have a lot of reward with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during Ramadan, but we may be spoiling our fast by yelling, shouting, arguing. That actually decreases the reward of the fast. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us self-restraint and control, especially with our spouses, those closest to us, our family members, and everyone in the ummah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for tawfiq. Wa sallallahu tabaraka wa ta'ala ala khayri khalqi Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.